Yeah, there's that intro music. Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I've missed that song. I'm kidding. It's actually my ringtone. I'm Bill Oram, joined by Brenna Greene on the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Brenna, what's happening?
What's up? I'm finally feel fully recovered from a grand total of 2.5 days in Las Vegas, but here we are. So yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I did not go to Vegas, and I'm just thinking, like, if we were to measure Vegas days like the same way we measure like dog years, like one day in Vegas is the equivalent of what, like 4 days anywhere else? 5, 365? What do you think the calculus is there?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I somehow managed during the Super Bowl, in which I was there for 10 whole days, to basically treat Vegas like it was a completely other city and not do the Vegas days thing. But let me tell you, 2 days in Vegas during the WCC tournament felt like 14 compared to the 10 days I did during the Super Bowl. So there you go. I was very good at just working, going to bed, eating it there when I was there for the Super Bowl. This time it was like, oh, and it's not like I do anything crazy. I don't. I just like talking to people. And next thing you know, it's like 5 a.m.
So speaking of people that you talk to,
yes.
It's a pleasure to be joining you here on the Oregonian Sports Podcast. And just as a quick matter of housekeeping, listeners will realize there's been a change. I'm Bill Oram, not Aaron Fentress, who has been the longtime awesome co-host for you on this podcast since its inception. Aaron's still here. He's still doing the Blazer Banter podcast, providing great Blazers coverage at OregonLive.com. But I'm going to be talking to you going forward, which is a fun change for me. I've always enjoyed listening to you and Aaron, and it's gonna be fun to step into the seat. Big shoes to fill. I feel like I'm gonna need to brush up on my pop culture knowledge to keep up with you, and certainly to even come close to the bar that Aaron set on that front. So if you need me, I'll have my face buried in Us Weekly somewhere.
I can't wait for the amount of puns that are about to be thrown my way. It's truly the number one thing I'm most excited about. So that is the thing that I will try to bring to this podcast. If I can elevate the pun game of the Oregonian Sports Podcast, I will. For those who don't know me, I'm the columnist at the Oregonian Sports Columnist. Would guess if we're here, you probably are a little familiar with my work. Yeah, I hope so.
But if not, nice to meet you, and look forward to doing this on a weekly basis. So, Brenna, we have a lot to get to, and your Vegas experience is at the top of my list. But, well, it's almost at the top of my list, because the most pressing thing we have to get to: where's Kate?
Where's Kate? You know it's good when we're leading a sports podcast with "Where is Kate Middleton?"
It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that, it is the only thing that matters in the entire universe. Like the Duchess of Windsor, is that the title? Is that?
Yeah, I think
sure,
you're right.
The Duchess of Wales, is she the Duchess of Wales?
I think you're right. I think
like
it's Wales.
Diana was Princess of Wales. Hold on. Let me just look this up. This is why we have the internet. I could have prepped.
Yeah, well, two Americans talking about British royalty. I mean, we're not going to get everything 100% right here. I mean,
this is par for the course.
Their constitution.
We're going to get aggregated on some like British show. Like, listen to these dumb Americans, or at least this one dumb American, trying to talk about the royals. Like that would be par for the course. Do you have a theory? Yeah. Like, what has happened to our beloved Princess of Wales?
I think that I do believe that she did get surgery, because I know she had some pretty rough pregnancies. So I know that, maybe I do believe the surgery thing. Man, they just I understand you want to release a photo on Mother's Day because it's tradition, and you don't want to have people being like, oh, you didn't release a photo, this means she's definitely dead. But man, come on. I mean, it's entertaining to watch this PR strategy. Of course this wasn't gonna go well. And then also you even release a photo, and you can't even Photoshop a ring on her finger. Like, if you're gonna Photoshop a whole photo, put a wedding ring on there, man. Like,
I would say for a Mother's Day photo, it contained a lot of Easter eggs.
it's we're off to a rousing start.
How many listeners do you think we've lost already? By the way, they're like, we're 5 minutes into this. I have not heard. You call it a sports podcast, but you've talked about partying in Vegas. I guess we heard the word Super Bowl, and we have not. And you said the WCC tournament, but we've talked about Kate, Us Weekly. I don't know, but this is important. Like, this is global affairs. This is
in the lexicon.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing. Like, you cannot separate anything happening in the world from Princess Kate and her current crisis. And by the way, I've learned more about the situation over there. You know, maybe some of Prince William's imbroglios or proclivities. You know, and as somebody who is the same age as Prince William, or close to the same age, and also is named William, I always was like, oh, there's my English counterpart. I'm distancing myself from you, Will. We are not the same anymore.
That's quite that's quite a leap right there, but I enjoy it.
Be a Harry, not a William.
Wow. We never thought we'd see the day. I don't know if you want to be either of them, to be completely frank with you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just, guys, I would have just taken the L and been like, hey, you know what? We didn't release a photo this year, but this is just like, I mean,
she's still convalescing. I
don't even know what the L. It's not even. It's worse than an L. This is like a D. They're taking the death. Like, I don't know. Like, I know all of this stuff, but it's just like with Kate. But it's just like, you release this photo that's so obviously edited, and then you come out and you have Kate say that she edited the photo.
Kate's not releasing statements like that. That's insane.
But also, is Kate? Come on, you're telling me that Kate edited an official photo that the Palace released? No.
Oh, is this this is the actual literal definition of palace intrigue, like a term that we use all the time in sports, but this is actually what it means. Okay.
What do you think?
I mean, I think that I probably I tend to believe that there is something afoot in their marriage, that there is a conflict in their marriage, that Kate is on strike as a princess, that she is angry at William, that they are heading towards some kind of split, based on the rumors, the gossip, the tabloids that are out there. By the way, I have to acknowledge the reported.
Please read. Are you gonna read the tweet that you sent me?
I can. Let me pull it up. Which one was it? Oh yeah, this was good. This was from. This is great. Dr. Una McIlvena tweeted, "OMG. Turns out Will's mistress Rose Hanbury's husband has been involved for years with François-Marie Bagnet, who swindled Liliane Bettencourt, the L'Oreal heiress, out of millions." I'm like, that is a Mad Libs of things. But the one that I'm really, so the woman who is alleged to be Will's mistress, I don't know if that's the term, but the woman who's, sure, she is. Did you watch the Stephen Colbert monologue about this?
I did not. I saw some John Oliver on it, but I did not see Stephen Colbert.
So she is her title is hold on. What's it called? This is, oh yes, the Marchioness of what appears to be Cholmondeley. The Marchioness of Cholmondeley, except for, as Stephen Colbert brought to my attention in, typically entertaining fashion, it's actually pronounced Chumley. The Marchioness of Chumley, spelled like Cholmondeley. So I just find the whole thing to be totally captivating and hilarious, and the ultimate social media wormhole.
Oh, it is. It most definitely is. It's the gift that keeps giving. I do feel bad for those kids. Man, this is awful for them. At some point, they're going to look this up and see everything that happened, and they're going to be like, what in the world did I grow up in? So feel for them.
I mean, history repeating itself in unfortunate ways.
Exactly.
For sure. Okay. So, did not plan on talking that much about the Royals and not the Kansas City ones or the Sacramento Kings or, what other, the Utah, by the way, did you see the Utah Royals? I will bring this back to sports. Did you see the Utah Royals did?
No,
the
I
Utah
did not,
Royals
please.
of the NWSL tweeted a statement from Utah Royals Football Club, the NWSL club that is starting back up in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
The royal family has been made aware of the news following the sudden disappearance of one of its members. The official statement from the Crown is that despite reports the member of the royal family is well and accounted for. For those wishing to see this, quote, missing member of the royal family, Kate will be present on the 16th of March at 5:30 p.m. at America First Field in Sandy, Utah. Because the Utah Royals, the NWSL team in Salt Lake City, Utah, have a player named Kate Delfava.
I mean, I respect
everybody
you
wants a piece.
I respect you trying to jump on that social media clout, but this maybe it was a bridge too far. But
well, and just what if something really horrible has happened? Like, we're just minimizing the possibility that something really horrible has happened. Okay, so we've brought it back to sports now. Yes, we have. I want to talk about what you were doing in Vegas because we were there for the WCC tournament at the Orleans Arena, which is, I believe, the same place I saw Robert Goulet perform when I was in the 8th grade.
Wow, that's an experience.
Talk about dreaming an impossible dream. But I will say, you could have. I could not have possibly foreseen what happened in the women's field of the WCC tournament. Nobody could have, right? Can we bring our audience up to speed if they were not watching the WCC tournament and the Pilot women? What happened? And then let's talk about how it happened.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know what's up with these Portland Pilot women in the WCC tournament, but boy, do we just turn it on there. It is unreal. First of all, they were down by 12 points at half to Santa Clara in the semis. And as these Portland Pilot women love to do in the WCC tournament, let me tell you, they had them right where they wanted them. Okay? They love a deficit in the WCC tournament. It's like, oh, we're down? We're down? Yes. They come back and win that game. Just absolutely insane. Like, they shut Santa Clara down. Lucy Cochran with a block at the end of the game on Tess Heel, who is going to be a name you are going to be hearing about next year or the year after. Tess Heel is a star, okay? She's going to be big. We'll see if she's there or somewhere else. That's not me speculating. That's just me thinking is the way college basketball works now.
The reality of that world.
That is something to just, keep in mind there. Then they go up against a Gonzaga team that beat them 90-40 2 weeks ago in Spokane.
I'm sorry, Brenna. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off, and maybe we need to record this part again. But it did sound like you said 90-40.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that would mean that they lost by 50 points.
Yeah, They lost by 50 points in Spokane on senior night. And I know, as somebody who does some sideline reporting for the Pilots, I know that, and I actually know that this was both ways. Both Gonzaga and UP were not happy with how the schedule laid out in terms of when they were facing each other. And that had to do with they started the WCC season against each other, and then they ended it, which is very, very weird to have that much time. And so they go up there on senior night and get run out of the gym. And both of these games, I mean, I don't remember the final score of the Gonzaga UP game that was down here, but Gonzaga had that game in hand for quite some time. So, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm rolling into that game and I'm looking at people on the sideline, and there's people who will vouch for me here. I was like, this is going to be bad.
Yeah. Well, so like the context here, Brenna, is that a year ago, the Pilots and Zags were like number 1 and 2 in the conference, and those games were epic, right? And like the regular season games were great. Well, there was like the really good one at UP, and then Haley Andrews got hurt, right? Am I remembering that correctly? So it was like a really close game, and then it was like 5 minutes, 10 minutes left, she gets hurt and gets helped off the floor. It's super emotional. They end up losing, but before that, the Pilots were in position to win that game, which would have been huge. And then, shocker in the WCC tournament. And this year, it just seemed like, the Pilots were right there in kind of that number 3 spot in the WCC, but not really a contender in the conference. Well, and so what ended up happening, it's not just that they lost badly to the Zags, it's that, they lost a ton of veteran leadership off of last year's team. This was not a team that anyone saw as a tournament team, and yet here we are. No. They're going dancing, so to speak. Yeah.
And I will say this, they did not get themselves, there was a few times where Gonzaga kind of had a bit of a lead against them, but they did not let themselves get in a deficit against Gonzaga, which I don't think they would have been able to come back from. And I was sitting there on the sideline going, this is going to be brutal, guys. Like, this is going to be brutal. And that was not the case. That was not the case at all. So here's something to blow your mind. Get ready for this. In the last 5 years, the Portland Pilots women's basketball team has won more WCC tournament titles than Gonzaga. 3-2. There you go.
And what notably was lost the opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament because of COVID in 2020, which, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going from memory here, but like I believe that was the first time that they had qualified for the NCAA tournament since like 97.
It'd been a really long time.
Something like that.
I forgot the actual
and so
year
the fact that,
as well.
So I mean, a really cool story happening on the Bluff, and Michael Meek, who's the head coach there, has done a great job. He was a former George Fox and Southridge coach. George Fox turns out some pretty good women's basketball coaches. And
if you don't know who we're referring to, that would be Scott Ruick at OSU.
It's called a segue. Brenna, we're gonna have to figure out our rhythm here. Like that. Don't give away the punchline. So Michael Meek is obviously, continuing that tradition of making the jump from George Fox to D1 and having a lot of success. Which leads us to, the fact that if you look at some of the projections of the tournament field, we could see a Michael Meek versus Scott Ruick, Pilots versus Beavers first round matchup in Corvallis. Not a video podcast, but you are crossing your fingers. Why is that so appealing to you? Other than, I guess, the logistical business side of it, where we get to cover 2 teams at once, 2 local teams at once. But tell me why that sounds compelling to you.
I mean, I understand some people being upset about it and being like, why do we have to have these 2 teams face off against each other? But ultimately, I think it's really, really good for women's basketball in the state of Oregon. This is going to give, this is an incredible, it's just an incredible storyline that people are going to be into. Like, Gil's already going to be rocking, let's be frank. But if you get UP down there, that's just so cool. Like you said, you've got 2 former George Fox coaches. You've got all this local talent on both of those teams that are going to be facing off. Not going to give away what my story idea is for next week. Anyway, so, but I just think that it's a cool. These are 2 programs that generally are not at the top of the heap when it comes to this sort of stuff. And they're both going to be in it. And I think it would just be a really cool celebration of women's basketball in the state of Oregon if they were to both go up against each other. Now, I hear people saying like, hey, why can't this... Why do they have to play each other? Like, why can't they, go somewhere else? Do something, I've seen brackets where UP's in Texas, which is great, but that's not going to give that. That's to me, I think this raises way more awareness for women's basketball in the state of Oregon than shipping UP off to, Austin or wherever else you want to send them. I just think it would be a really cool experience. And also, then you're guaranteed to have a local team in the round of 32.
counterpoint would be that
Yep.
it would just be more opportunities to highlight women's basketball in the state. You're kind of consolidating your two representatives, right?
Yep.
So there's one game that people will watch and say, hey, the basketball in the state of Oregon is good, as opposed to two. That said, I think that the uniqueness of it is worth having and worth celebrating. So I do agree with you. And I also would say, you know, I mean, this is, you'd have two local fan bases. Like you said, Gill is going to be, you know, close to sold out probably, because you're going to bring, you know, the Pilots fan base down I-5. And also depending on who those other two teams that come in for the opening round would be. You know, the Beavers should advance, right? The Beavers should, they will be favored. They'll be the highest seed. They're going to be hosting. They should advance to the Sweet 16. It is built for them to advance to a regional. And so, you know, I mean, and the Pilots, you know, if they are there, they're the 14 seed. Like, they are going to be the team that should lose. I mean, it's sports, it's March. You know, you can't get in the business of predicting wins and losses, but you would expect the Beavers to advance, and you would expect the Pilots to probably, you know, again, it's sports. It'd be really cool if they won, but like, they are not going to be favored to advance from the opening round. And so if they are going to lose a game in the first round, wouldn't it be cool if it was here against the Beavers? Now, if the Pilots go to Corvallis and somehow knock this Oregon State team out of the NCAAs in the opening round, really cool for them, would be great, but it would be a huge bummer to not see the Beavers advance, I guess, would be the only thing, because that team has been just wonderful to watch this year, and they seem like they are poised to make some real noise in the tournament. And I don't know if that means, you know, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, but, you know, this is a team that does seem built to, you know, I think they're tournament ready. I think the Beavers are tournament ready based on what we've seen from them. Some of the adversity that they've faced this year, a seasoned team where you have, you know, Reagan Beers as a sophomore, Donovan Hunter's coming to her own as the point guard there out of South Medford. And then Talia von Oelhoffen is just the heart and soul of this team. And you've seen it with the way she kind of carried them through that absence of Reagan Beers when she had her nose broken. It's not just the big shot against UCLA. It's the way she stepped in all the other ways against USC and Stanford. Games they lost, but I thought acquitted themselves really, really well considering they were shorthanded. So, you know, I've seen the Beaver women play, you know, half a dozen times this year. I mean, not quite that many in person, but probably 4 or 5 times in person, and then many more on TV. What have been your impressions of them, and like how good do you think this Oregon State team is?
I just want to say one thing more about like the potential matchup, and that is if they go, if you split them up and have them go to different places, that's fine, but you are going to get way more awareness for both programs if they're together than if they're apart. And I'm not saying that, you know, Oregon State's still going to get the attention, but I think that it ups both teams. I think it just raises it for both teams. So I think one game is way bigger than having, you know, these two separate games. So anyways, and if UP wins, like that's still a cool story around this state. Like that is huge. They're going to be the talk of this state if they won that. So yeah, there you go. Okay, on to Oregon State. I mean, I think that this is, I'm really bummed. I'll just say this. I'm really bummed that they're not going to be in the Portland Regional, because there's just no way. They're not going to be here. And that is because the way that the seeding works out, you're going to have Stanford and USC here, and they do not want to put another Pac-12 team in this regional. So sorry to OSU. If you win, you're going to get shipped off to Albany, New York, which is really disappointing, considering, you know, you've got a regional an hour and a half away. You've got 2 regionals an hour and a half away. But that is how the seating worked out. It stinks. I'm not a fan. But generally, I mean, I think that this team is, it's just a bright spot in a state right now that, quite frankly, is kind of struggling in college hoops. Like, you know, Oregon has been Oregon. they've been doing what they've been doing the last few years for the men. It's really frustrating. The Oregon women definitely not playing up to the standard that Kelly Graves has set out there. And, he would be the first person to admit that to you. And then you've got Oregon State men who are, last in the conference, and yes, do have some really good sophomore pieces on their team. But as we talked about earlier in this podcast, we will see if they are still on their team, if those players are still on their team come May. So, it's just, and this is a team that feels very, they're very committed to Oregon State as well. Like Talia was very, very vocal on Twitter when everything went down with the Pac-12 conference, and how she is committed to this team, committed to this school, and how upset she is. I feel like this team has really, maybe even more so than the football team, taken it on their shoulders to be like, we're going to represent this school and the best that we have here, and the fact that we deserve to have shots just like the other Power 5 programs on the West Coast. So that has been really fun to see, and I think that they really took that whole situation to heart and have used that as fuel. It's a fun team to watch. They have a lot of talent, and there's also, and you never know like who's going to step in and have a big game. There's always like, that Reagan and Talia are going to have good games, and Tamia for that matter. But there's always like one or two players that you're like, each game where you're like, oh, they had a good game. So I'm excited to see what they do in March. And like I said, very disappointed that they're not going to be here.
Would agree. Certainly. I mean, there was a point in the middle of the season where after they beat Colorado and Utah at home, I think was when you sort of had that moment of like, oh, this is a really good team. This is one of those Oregon State teams. And you've got a regional, like you said, 80 miles up the road. It's felt like it was kind of coming together. And I mean, there's technically a way it could happen, but the NCAA would have basically, or the selection committee would basically have to break their own rules to make it happen. So I don't see that. I just don't see it. And so I'm with you. But the thing that this team did, I think, is it's found its stride. It beat Colorado and Utah at home. It went on the road and beat Colorado and Utah 2 weeks later. Those were two teams that were both ranked higher in net rating. Were viewed as national. I mean, Colorado was ranked number 3 in the country when they came to Corvallis and lost. Colorado had beaten LSU when LSU was ranked number 1 in the country at the beginning of the season. Angel Reese and that kind of just juggernaut of a team. So Colorado was being taken really seriously. So Oregon State wins those games, and then Reagan Beers gets hurt. And all of a sudden, Oregon State is without their most reliable player, best player, I think, leading scorer, leading rebounder. And you take Reagan Beers off for, I think, 4.5 games, and you're playing USC, you're playing Stanford, you go on the road to play Washington State and UW. And like, you drop 3 of those 4 games, which makes it seem like you're reeling or you're losing momentum going into the Pac-12 tournament. But I actually viewed it the other way, where you are actually finding some success, not wins, but success with how you're playing without Reagan. You're making it so you need more from like Lily Hansford or these other like Adley Blacklock.
You could even say Donovan Hunter,
Perova, and Donovan Hunter. And I think that really, I think that made this team stronger. And then you put Reagan Beers back in, who's an easy person to play with. I mean, she, obviously, she's going to rebound. She's going to score at the basket. She's going to draw a double team and kick it out to the shooters. So I think that actually made them better. And I think you saw that with the way they closed the season. I thought they played really well in the Pac-12 tournament. I thought they just kind of ran out of gas against Stanford, which is fine. I mean, they kind of were taking it to Stanford for the first 3 quarters. Yeah. So I think this team is in a really good position. I mean, going on the road, going across the country, that's always a bit of a wild card. But this, Final Four, maybe we're just kind of at the stage where it's like that's impossible to predict, and it depends on matchups and all of that. But like, this is a team that you should be playing really high profile, really high stakes games once we get past next week.
Yeah. The Portland Regional, it's just, it's unfortunate. I just want to say, I mean, gosh, Iowa, you had to play well in the Big Ten tournament. Like, we were going to get Iowa. We are not getting Iowa anymore. They're going to be in Albany. And and there's a few, like Oregon State, and yeah, it was just, there was a lot of, we're still going to get, I mean, great storylines, you know, as long as Stanford wins, we're getting Stanford and Cameron Brink, USC, Juju Watkins, we're getting that. We're going to get Kim Mulkey, which is going to be an experience seeing Kim Mulkey in Portland, Oregon. Not exactly, I think, her preferred destination in life.
Her vibe.
No, I'm not seeing that.
I mean, there are probably parts of Oregon that she'd be really comfortable in. I think what we're talking about, and maybe we just haven't quite drilled down into, is, and like I think you did, but what a moment women's basketball is having, and that's nationally. That's with the WNBA. That's with WNBA expansion. That's Caitlin Clark, and the moment. This is a cultural moment for women's basketball, but it is locally a phenomenon as well. It is where here we are in March, and the biggest stories that we have in the state are these women's basketball teams. And I think I would also say conversely, the fact that Oregon isn't very good and that we're having conversations about Kelly Graves and his job security and how's he going to rebuild this program and things like that. Like, there is not a bigger sports story in the state of Oregon right now than what's happening with women's basketball. And you could say it's the Beavers, it's the Pilots, it's the regional coming. I would submit that it's the hopes that remain for a WNBA team, which are still very much active, by the way. And I would say it's like, it's all of it. It's all of it happening at once. And so I think that, that is what needs to be acknowledged here, is that we are at like I mean, we've had these moments. We've had Sabrina. We've had Final Four teams from Oregon State and Oregon. But this feels like yet another watershed moment for women's basketball locally and certainly nationally. So I'd say nationally, but also especially locally. Can we talk about Kelly Graves?
Yeah, sure.
And
what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to do it in the context of Kelly Graves, Wayne Tinkle. So
Dana can be put in that conversation as well.
Dana can be put in that conversation also. Dana
the situation is a little bit different.
It is. I think the Dana question is more, does he want to keep doing this? Will he retire? What is his 5-year plan? I don't see a ton of bloodlust for Dana Altman. I think there's people who are like, maybe it's time for Dana to retire. But what's different is fans of Oregon women's basketball, at least the ones I hear from, are like, they want their pound of flesh when it comes to Kelly Graves. Like, it's time for Kelly Graves to go. Mark Campbell was the real motor of those teams. Kelly can't do this. He needs to be fired. I get a lot of emails that say that. And then conversely, you look at Oregon State and the men, there's a huge amount of, fan support for firing Wayne. And I think that there are arguments to be made to making changes with both of those programs. I guess where I am fatigued of the fantasy ADs out there. And like I used bloodlust earlier. I think that's the right word.
ADs. I love it.
When it comes to like firing coaches because they aren't giving you what you want exactly when you want it. Kelly Graves has had more success. It's success that just didn't exist.
No, it didn't exist before he got there. And
yes, they've missed the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. This is the first losing season he's had at Oregon since his first year, I believe. Is that I believe it's the first losing season they've had since his first year, and he's only had like 2 losing seasons in however many years. He won 10 straight WCC titles at Gonzaga. I mean, it's just, his record is virtually unimpeachable, and his teams have gotten worse the last 3 years. And so the conclusion is he has to be fired. And I just don't subscribe to that. I mean, I think it's a conversation worth having. Like, what are we doing here? What does the future look like? Does Kelly at 61 years old does he have the stomach for like a full rebuild? Like, does he want to do this? I think is a fair question. But, and so there's that one, right? And then with Wayne, we're talking about a place that didn't have any success for 24 years before he got there either. And it is a hard job. It's a very difficult job. and that's not to let them off the hook for the fact that they've been bad, but also if you've watched Oregon State closely, after the Elite Eight run in 2021, they, completely bottomed out. Like the players that Tinkle brought in were a disaster. That team was one of the worst teams in the history of high major college basketball. Just absolutely brutal. So you are literally starting from square one. And last year you bring in freshmen in Jordan Pope, Tyler Bilodeau, and Michael Ratai, who have become kind of the core of a team. And if you watch the Beavers this year, and I understand not a lot of people did, they were at 5-15 in the Pac-12, which is nothing to write home about. They were the 12 seed in the Pac-12 tournament. They were the worst team in the conference. I want to be clear about that. But they were pretty darn competitive, and they were entertaining. Jordan Pope got completely, he was the victim of their record, I think, when it came to all Pac-12 honors. I mean, he was certainly one of the 15 best players in the conference. I just think that there is not enough of an acknowledgement of Oregon State is actually going in the right direction, the Oregon State men. And the Oregon women, not currently going in the right direction, but they have somebody in place who has proven that he can do things that nobody else has ever been able to do there.
And they have a great recruiting class coming in, too.
A phenomenal recruiting class, which is a thing. I mean, I think it's ranked 17th or something like that. But he's bringing in 5-star players.
Yes.
So it's this is not some total free fall. And I think the question for both of these, and I'm going to throw it to you here in a second, but the question for both of these coaches is, are you going to keep your talent from leaving in the transfer portal? Because if the basketball transfer portal is anything like it was in football for Oregon State, they could really be in trouble. Because if you lose Jordan Pope, Tyler Bilodeau, you're kind of back at square one. It's like you're going to the WCC next year. Those guys would shred the WCC, and they would be one of the 4 best teams in the WCC.
Yeah, I think so.
And Gonzaga's there, St. Mary's is there, Washington State will be there. So I mean, it's not just theirs for the taking, obviously, but you are going to be a competitive
Gonzaga. But anyways, continue.
But you'd be a competitive, compelling team in the WCC. So there's something to look forward to there. But what do you think of those two coaches? Maybe we should take them separately. But those two coaches, their situations, and this idea that they must be fired.
Things I'm going to acknowledge right off the top. I have known Kelly Graves since I was 20 years old. I am close with people in his family. Mm-hmm. I was the host. Ooh, here you go. Here's some fun trivia for you. I was the host of the Kelly Graves show my senior year. So there you go. Me and Kelly on set together, baby. So I will acknowledge.
Who was a better co-host, Kelly Graves or me?
To be fair, he wasn't really a co-host. It was more like me talking to him. I don't know. Anyways, it was fun. It was good. He does have the tapes. He has the tapes of him and I, which is pretty funny. So I will admit that I am a little bit predisposed to have a bit of a bias here per se. But I think that you got to give it one more year. You got to at least give it one more year. Next year, if we're having the same discussion next year, that's a problem. And to be fair, the transfer portal for Oregon women's basketball in particular has been an issue. I mean, you look around college basketball right now. You look who was even playing for them last year. I mean, you have Tahina. I mean, obviously, Tahina Pau made the right decision by going to not Santa Clara, Jesus, going to South Carolina. She made the right decision, India Rogers leaves. You had Taylor Mikesell at Ohio State. All this former talent that was there that, could have done something. And Sedona Prince at TCU. So you had all this talent that just kind of didn't work out. And that's really unfortunate for them, and something that I think Kelly needs to take a good long look in the mirror. Now, for Tahina, you aren't going to keep up NIL wise with South Carolina. You just aren't. That's not his fault. That's not his fault. Oregon was just not going to be able to get the NIL money for Tahina that South Carolina was going to be able to get. I know you're giving me that look, but there is a certain stopping point at some point. You know what I mean? And South Carolina just has more resources in terms of that for women's basketball than I'd say the vast majority of other schools in the country. But but I think the transfer portal is a place that they're going to have to be really, really cognizant of this offseason. I mean, I'm sure that there's schools right now coming after Chance Gray and Grace Van Sluten. Like, those two girls have got to be dealing with stuff right now. You've got a few others on that team as well that I'm sure are getting offers. But, it's a situation. Yeah, they're just going to have to be really protective over their players. If they're going to make any sort of waves next year, because you can't do it with all freshmen. You just can't.
Can you say something real quick for me?
Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test.
You're not coming through on my headphones anymore. But when I unpaired my headphones, I could hear it. So for some reason, I could not hear. You're just not coming through my headphones anymore, and they're not dead. Hold on a second. Let me. Speak.
Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test.
Good. We're good. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Coolio.
Cool.
Okay.
What was the last thing you said?
I was basically saying that they're going to have to be really, really protective in terms of the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And that they're going that because they can't do it all with this freshman class next year. They have to keep their pieces around if they're going to have any shot.
Yep. So 3, 2, 1. I'll bring it back. 3, 2, 1. That's completely it. They have proven that they can bring the talent in. It's just been that the talent has been, on the turnstiles of recruiting, they've been losing as much or more than they've been able to bring in. And that's the question I would have, at Oregon State as well. If Oregon State can get the NIL package together to keep Jordan Pope in Corvallis, that'd be an amazing win for Wayne Tinkle. But I think you hit on this. If we're having this conversation next year about Kelly Graves, and they were, they get totally manhandled in the Big Ten, and if Oregon State doesn't really look that competitive in the WCC, like, we're probably talking about changes at both of those programs. But I do think that both of them have had the success to deserve the benefit of the doubt, within reason. I don't think it's and it's certainly not a lifetime contract for either of them. But I mean, Kelly Graves, I mean, the success is just on a totally different level. And even if you look at the Elite Eight run that Wayne Tinkle took Oregon State on, multiple NCAA tournament appearances in a decade is something that wasn't happening there. It wasn't happening under Eddie Payne, Richie McKay, Craig Robinson, Jay John. So, that's right. I named him. And
Craig Robinson.
So I think not the office Craig Robinson, the Oval Office Craig Robinson. Thank you. And so I do think that both those coaches have one more shot to get it right in their respective programs.
Well, and let's just be completely frank. Oregon may have the money to buy Kelly Graves out of his contract. Oregon State certainly does not.
It is very much there's very much a calculus that Oregon State is making. I don't know if Oregon State had been truly bad this year, 2 years ago bad and uncompetitive, they might have had no choice. But I think Wayne gave them enough to be able to say, well, we still believe in him, but really what we believe in is not paying this $9 million.
Yeah. And I mean, by the way, like I said, I don't think Oregon really wants to buy out their women's basketball coach as well. Like, I don't think that's something they really want to be spending their money on. So, I think that those two contracts right now are what they are, and they're going to get another year just because of how it looks. And like you said, we'll see how next year goes. Now, as you said before, Dana is not someone Dana is somebody where there's a question about retiring. He came out a few, days ago before the Pac-12 tournament and said, no, I am not thinking about retirement. I have not spoken to anybody. I don't know. If they would have lost last night to UCLA, I think we would be having a much different talk right now. but thankfully they held on.
It's interesting. Like
I
with
feel
Dana,
like there needs to be a change. I feel like there needs to be a change. I'm sorry. I feel like it's time. Personally, yeah. Anyways, continue.
Dana's in an interesting spot. He's won 750 games in his career. He's a grandfather. I think the pace of his life has slowed down a little bit. And I think the thing this is just something I wonder about the business of coaching entirely is, are people who've put in 30 years, or have put in the bulk of their life in college athletics when it looked a certain way, right? And are they really that interested in diving into the shark-infested waters of NIL, transfer portal? And I mean, I'm not naive enough to say that there wasn't money exchanging hands previously, and that there weren't incentives that got players to certain programs. I mean, obviously that has existed. It's not like 2 years ago was the first time Dana Altman had ever heard about a player he was recruiting wanting money, but it just the nature of the job has changed so much that I do wonder if we've seen it, like Jay Wright, coaches retiring earlier than you would expect them to in college programs. And I think that, that's a question for Dana Altman. I think it's a question for Kelly Graves, Wayne Tinkle, where you already were not, it was a tough job to convince people to come to Corvallis. And now you don't have a great NIL setup, and you're losing the Power 5 designation. It just Power 6 in basketball. It's becoming, what is your stomach for this in addition to, the results? So Dana, I don't know. I think Dana kind of, the thing about the Ducks is going into their weekend against, going into their game against Arizona 2 weeks ago, was it a week ago? Whenever that was, on the road in Tucson, when they got absolutely smoked. Before that game,
rough.
They had a path to winning the conference, or the regular season conference title. Still, they could have, certain things would have happened, but they were still in that mix. So we're not talking about a team that is 8th, 7th. I mean, they ended up being the 4 seed in the tournament, but they were right in the mix for most of the season, despite being pretty mediocre. So, Dana Altman is still doing, I think, a decent job. But to your point, you're talking about now you're going to have, a third year in the NIT? It's a little stale right now. And so what is he going to do to, brush off some of that dust and make Oregon the dynamic program that it was for the bulk of the Pac-12 era?
And you even look back 2019, they had to go down to the Pac-12 tournament and win the whole thing to get in. So, this has been, yes, they made a Final Four, but since then, and I feel like, as somebody who went down to that Oregon-Arizona game, I'll admit, I haven't been to any Oregon State men's basketball games this year. I haven't been to any Oregon women's basketball games this year. So I don't know. But just as somebody who went down for that Oregon-Arizona game, I'm like, this is such a huge game. The Ducks win this game, they're in the top 25 at that point. If they won against Arizona, I would have been putting them in my top 25 the next week. And they, and I just got a sense that the community just isn't behind it. The vibes there were weird. There was a lot of empty seats at Tip, which, I know that I'm coming from covering a program and being an alum of a program where, a top 25 team comes in, and let me tell you, that place is on fire. It doesn't matter who it is. Let's party. Okay. So I get that. I get that I'm coming from a different place, from a different school that has different emphasis. But this is also Eugene. They normally get behind teams that are big. And I didn't get the sense down there that this was a community that was super backing of this team. And between that and the issues I think that persist with NIL down there, I just don't think that Dana, it's just not the waters he wants to swim in, which is totally fine. But if that's not the waters you want to swim in this day and age, it's probably time then, And I know he's coming out saying I'm not retiring and all that sort of stuff, but if you can't swim in those waters, you might not have a choice of when your last day is. So, I just kind of get the sense that there needs to be some sort of injection of energy into that program down there. And I just don't feel that there is a lot of energy and passion behind it right now. And I think Dana has done, like I said, Dana's done great things. I mean, they went to a Final Four. But that was 7 years ago now. And college sports is a what have you done for me lately business. And this is an Oregon team over the last few years that has just not been very, and it's a longer stretch, than, like I said, you do go in 2019, all that sort of stuff, but you got to win the tournament in that situation. And then you have the last 3 years, and it's just a different standard than Oregon State. It just is. That's what it is down there. It's a different standard. And right now I don't feel like that standard has been met. And I feel like it's been a longer situation of that not being met. And like I said, I don't think that Dana is particularly adept in the current state of college basketball.
I think it'll be interesting to see what he says when it is all over for the season. You go back to last year after the NIT loss against Wisconsin in the quarterfinals of the NIT at home. They did not draw well, and Dana was, really kind of took it to the community and the fan base and said, if the problem's me, I'll go back to coaching junior college basketball. So I do feel like he is planting those kinds of breadcrumbs or dropping those sorts of breadcrumbs. I would also say about the Arizona game that you're talking about, the vibes were weird. I think, Matt Preem from he broke
and there
down
were other reasons as to why.
A lot of the in-game sort of stuff at Oregon has drawn a lot of backlash. But one thing specifically about that game was they chose to honor the football team for its Fiesta Bowl win, and the football team they blocked off the entire end zone for the football team, which sort of trickled in and then left after they were honored. But they got honored, but they were honored on the floor as unfortunate. It was just unfortunate timing. As Keyshawn Bartholomew was on the floor writhing in pain. We're all sitting there just sort of dumbfounded. And I don't blame Dan Lanning for this. That was nobody's fault. It was just cognitively really hard to watch. Dan Lanning saying, at center court with the mic saying, "Come to our spring game. We're this." Rah. And then you've got Keyshawn Bartholomew with on the other end of the floor, being carried off the floor, and Dana Altman's in tears because it's such a gruesome injury. It was just, it was just one of the weirder moments I've seen in sports because of the two things happening at the same time. So very weird game, very weird day. I thought Oregon was mostly competitive in that game. It was just Caleb Love also scored 36 points.
Bad scout.
Or he's just really
scout, which really Dana admitted. Dana has said that a few times this year about his staff, or he said that the scout has not been good, which is very interesting to see him say that publicly.
Brenna, I feel like I need to, going forward, just carve out a segment of this podcast.
Oh boy.
And it can be at the beginning, it could be at the end, or maybe it'll just be interspersed throughout. We're going to have to figure this out. This is going to be a feel thing, I think, now that we are co-hosting this thing.
Yes.
But I feel like I need a segment titled The Life of Brenna because there are things that anyone who follows you on social media inevitably learns about you, whether it is your travel travails, whether it is your I
haven't spoken about that publicly yet.
I know, but it is something you would speak about. Or it is a really heartwarming moment with a young fan at the Child Center, which is one thing you did post on. And I'd like to touch on both of these before we get out of here.
Okay.
Let's start with the let's start with on the new segment, The Life of Brenna. We're going to need new theme music, by the way, just for The Life of Brenna. Like, what I'm going to say, and it's time for a weekly segment I like to call The Life of Brenna, and then we're going to get boo, and then it's going to be into that segment. So in The Life of Brenna, let's talk first about your travel experience getting home from Las Vegas.
Oh boy. Yeah.
How was that?
So everybody who is who listened to the top of this podcast knows that I spoke about, you know, like when I go out in Vegas, like it's not like I'm like I'm not like it's not like I'm like going hard or anything like that. So I want to make this 100% clear. Like, yes, was I out late at certain places? Yes, but that's not why this all went down. So I did go to a very popular establishment for journalists called Circle Bar at Park MGM. That is, if you want to find some journalists during conference tournament week, any other really big sports week in Vegas, I can almost bet you'll find some at Circle Bar at Park MGM. That is the spot. So anyways, my flight out of Vegas, the day that I left, was at 7 a.m. So that means I'm going to have to leave to go to the airport around like 5:15. And at this point, I'm like, man, I could sleep for like 4 hours, or I could just truck this out. So I take the option of, let's truck it out, baby. I wasn't working that day. I was off that day because I'd worked enough in Vegas where I could take that day off. So I was like, okay, you can just sleep when you get home. All right, cool. So I'm like, you're just going to stay up all night. Which I definitely did the last time I was in Vegas, by the way, as well. Had the same strategy the last time. And yeah, I should say the last time as in the last time I was there for the WCC tournament, just to make that clear. So I went to Circle Bar, and I am not joking when I say this. I did not have, and I can have people vouch for me, I did not have a singular drink that night. I was like, it got to like 1 a.m. I hadn't had anything yet. And I was like, you know what? I'm good. Like, I don't need to. I'm good. So I stayed at Circle Bar until like 3:30 and then was like, all right, I'm going to vamoose. So I go back to my room. I do a few things in my room. I'm like, all right, it's 5:05. My friend, one of my best guy friends, him and I always go to the WCC tournament together every year. That's like one of our things. So he told me he drove there because he lives in Phoenix. So he was like, I'll take you to the airport in the morning. I'll take you at 5:15. So I'm like, all right. So I text him at 5:05. I'm like, hello, whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not good at 5:10. I remember thinking to myself, this isn't good. You haven't heard anything back yet. This is not good. This is not good. And then my body decided to go into full shutdown mode. And by that, I mean, I woke up at 6:15. And I was like, this is bad. So I go into like, hazy, oh my gosh, I've just got to get to the airport, blah, 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 blah. I'm just trying to grab stuff from my room. And I, get my suitcase, get my backpack. All right, we're good to go. I get the Uber. I head down to the Uber. I'm loading stuff into the Uber. And then I have the moment of, your camera is still in the room. Yeah. So I couldn't leave that in Vegas. So I I hadn't taken a key card with me when I left the room. So I had to go back to registration, get a new key card at like, now it's like 6:25, whatever. Get a new key card, run back up to the room, grab the camera, come back down. But by the time I get down to the Uber, it's too late. I know I'm not making this flight. There ain't no way. So I literally got to the airport with 10 minutes to spare. Apparently, I had somebody tweet at me. Apparently, my name was announced over the intercom. So that's great. I love that on a direct flight back to Portland, that my name was announced over the intercom, in which there are definitely people who know who I am on that plane. So now we have the story out there publicly as to what happened. This was not some crazy night of partying in Las Vegas for Brenna. It was strictly a mission to just stay up so that I could then sleep when I got home. So I get there, and thank you to our fine friends at Southwest who booked me on another plane and did not charge me. That's awesome. I appreciate that a lot. So I get booked onto another plane. I get to the gate. No less than 2 minutes of me being at the gate over the intercom. So we've overbooked this plane by 3 passengers. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, we're going to give travel vouchers. And I'm like, I'm listening. I got $700 in travel vouchers from Southwest.
You did this. This was your doing.
I know. By getting off this plane, getting on to another plane, by the way, that actually technically got me to Portland sooner. The route got me to Portland sooner. And so I did have to stay and wait at the airport for my bags because my bags still went on the flight path that they were supposed to be on. So I just literally walked to another gate, got on another plane, and then got back to Portland. So kids, here's your lesson. Sometimes oversleep for your flights, and then you too could get $700 in travel vouchers.
Okay, this story has been unsatisfying to me because it's just I've encountered people in my life who I think that there is one statement where it just things seem to work out for you. Like things work out for Brenna. Things work out for Brenna. Like even though Brenna overslept, did not like fulfill her end of the social contract of like traveling from Vegas to Portland, things worked out for Brenna. So that is good for you. Congratulations. I hope you go somewhere very nice and maybe make a small donation to charity for your good fortune.
I don't know if I have ever gone from just that feeling of all out panic to absolute elation in the span of an hour. Like, it was insane. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me like $300 to switch planes. This is going to stink. Oh God. Like, I'm so upset with myself. I can't believe I did this. By the way, my friend who was supposed to take me to the airport, he fell asleep with his phone in his hand and his phone died. So he didn't wake up until I was about to board my plane to San Jose, which eventually took me to Portland. So that whole situation is another thing. And the only reason why he woke up when he woke up apparently is because the hotel we were staying in had alarms went off. And so they were making everybody evacuate the hotel, or else that guy would have been in bed until at least 9 o'clock. So anyways, there you go. But yeah, I don't know how it all happened. I don't know, but I'm going to take it. I apparently have built up some good karma, and I will cash that in. Thank you very much.
Part 2 of the life of Brenna, is this moment that you shared on social media about a young fan coming up to you and basically meeting you, Brenna Greene from KOIN 6, was a life highlight for her. And can you just tell us, your audience, what that moment meant to you and why it was so powerful as a woman in sports?
Well, maybe I've built up this good karma because, to be completely frank, the last month and a half in this job has been really, really taxing. And if you are someone who is close to me, you would know what the situations I have been dealing with are. There have been multiple. They have been constant. I feel like I cannot escape. And I want to make something clear. This has nothing to do with my employer, KOIN 6. All of these situations have happened outside of that place. So I don't want anybody to think that this has anything to do with my job, because it does not actually. Or I guess my employer. Does it have to do with my job? Yes. Would I have been put in these situations if it weren't for my job? I wouldn't have. Being a woman in this field is really not fun. And you have to deal with a lot of people saying and doing things that are just simply not okay. And then you have to make a decision as to whether or not you are going to act on said things. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. And in some situations, I know that if I went and talked to some people about some things that I've been put through, I might actually be putting my career at risk. And that is really difficult to navigate and not fun, because guess what? The people who are doing things to you like that, they know that. They know that you aren't going to say anything because you might be putting yourself in a bad spot and it might ultimately backfire on you. So that's really frustrating to have to navigate and deal with. And like I said, there's been more than a few situations. So yeah, I was coming into that state tournament feeling a little bit low. And then also on top of it, I was reminded of a situation I dealt with at the state tournament last year that was particularly not fun, with a certain coach yelling at me for a situation that I wasn't warranted. Let's put it that way. And do I think he would have been yelling at a man like that? Gonna go with a no. And that person was around the state tournament and probably had ample opportunities to probably apologize to me and did not. So anyways, I was just, feeling a little bit low, and this girl's dad came up to me. I forget what day it was. It was probably Thursday of the state tournament, and said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember, but you met my daughter last year." And then all of a sudden things started kind of like connecting in my brain. And I was like, oh, yes. I do remember that now that you say it, like, yes, I remember that. And he's like, when I talked to her about coming back to the state tournament this year, the first thing she asked is if that girl wearing the cool jumpsuit was going to be there this year. Cause I wore a jumpsuit to the state championships last year. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, she's going to be back here tomorrow. And I go, please tell her to come say hi. So she originally came and said hi, like while I was like grinding to get everything done for the 5 o'clock news. So I was like, hey, I'll come. I'm going to come find you. Just let me get through this and then I'll come find you. And yeah, she, it was a good reminder of the fact that, what you are doing matters. And, it's something that I kind of put into perspective the night before, but it really put everything to perspective that day, of the fact that, when I go in those back hallways at state tournaments and am doing interviews, because that's, we go to interviews outside of the locker rooms. When I go back there, I am the only female back there. The only one at the Oregon State tournament. And so it just put into perspective between her having this moment with me and, making, I would say it was probably more impactful on me in that moment than it maybe even was on her, because, it made me realize, okay, what I'm doing does matter. And I'm not just doing this like completely in vain and putting myself through all of these situations for what? That's what really has been going through my brain the last few months. It's like, why do I keep putting myself in a job that is making me suffer? Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And, I'm not saying that those situations, that still isn't going through my brain, to be completely frank with you. But this situation helped me realize that, yes, I am still making a difference. And, just that in combination with seeing what the back hallways look like and being like, okay, those two things just made me realize that, yes, what I am doing matters. And what I am doing is making a bigger impact than just being a sports reporter. So yeah, it was a very cool moment. And I really, appreciate her for making me feel good, because you know what? I think I helped her feel good. And I think, but I think she may have made me feel even better. So you never know if, a 10-year-old can make your day. There you go. So make your week, make your month, honestly. So, yeah.
Well, I love that story. And I love that, the idea of finding inspiration anywhere or in any interaction, you never know when it's going to come. And I think, I speak for everyone who's listening. I hope you, get to a little bit of a better place, but also know, I mean, you are doing great work and everyone appreciates having you on the scene. And, I know as somebody who is in those back hallways with you, you're right. There are not enough women in these jobs. And so for you to feel like that's, not a place for you sometimes is really unfortunate, and something we all should think about in our business and people who are consuming the news as well.
And I've felt that a lot of places, but I'm not going to lie, I didn't expect to feel it in Portland, Oregon. But and I think probably the place that made like Montana was really rough on me too. Montana was really rough. And that's probably these are probably similar feelings 10 years apart for me. But they're different. It's different stuff, but it's similar stuff, if that makes sense. So, I think people think that, this sort of stuff has lessened, and, I'm here to tell you it hasn't. Straight up, I'm here to tell you it hasn't. Sometimes it is better. Sometimes it is. You go through waves. As all things in life, you go through waves. But apparently, right now, I am in a wave that is not. It's great. Thankfully, I have not had anything over the last week or two. So hopefully, we're turning a new page. Yeah. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, the Life of Brenna segment. I feel like my music is a little too jolly and jaunty for that moment, but. I do. Brenna, I want to thank you. I mean, I think this has been a lot of fun. Our first episode of the Bill and Brenna version of the Oregonian Sports Podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to be here doing this with you. If anybody was not listening, at the beginning, or somehow missed the beginning, I'm going to be here on a weekly basis with Brenna, keeping the vast world of sports in the Oregon and beyond landscape covered. We're going to dip into some other cultural touch points as well, including the ongoing search for Princess Kate. Where is she? Hopefully by next week we'll know, or maybe even better yet, we won't, because it's been fun not having an answer to that. Brenna, I mean, we're going to be back next week. We're going to touch on a bunch of stuff. Yep. A programming note, next week, I'm going to have an interview on this same podcast channel with Brett Hollins, who was the feature of a recent series of stories I did, a Southern Oregon basketball player who spent 4 years in prison after an assault in Ashland. He just wrapped up his playing career at Southern Oregon University, oldest player in college basketball. Going to have a chance to talk to him about what's coming up next for him. So that'll be next week here on the Oregonian Sports Podcast. And Brenna, I just want to say thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for making room for me on your show.
On my show. Excited about this new era. And let's get it.
Okay, we'll be back next week. Subscribe, rate, all the things that other podcast hosts tell you to do that I don't have a great script for. Do those things for us. And in the meantime, feel free to hit us up on social media. I'm at Bill Oram on Twitter and everywhere else. Brenna is at Brenna Greene with an E and an underscore.
Ooh, look at you.
Is that right?
Yes, you're right.
That's how you know I spent too much time on X, formerly known as Twitter. Okay, well, we appreciate you. If you have questions, if you have thoughts, observations, please hit us with those on social media, email. We're also pretty easy to find online. So look forward to hearing from our devoted listeners, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening.